Hi, everybody. I'm going to put one of the Mentimeter voting things up on the screen here. There you go. Okay, if you're just getting in, come on in and join the Menti and use the code. And then we'll talk about the Keystone Pipeline in a few minutes. Okay, so tell me what you think about the energy policy of the United States. Should we focus on maintaining the environment? In other words, don't do things that harm the environment energy-wise, or should we focus on lowering energy costs? Tell me what you think there. After you vote too, you can go into our classroom page and pull up today's constitutional debate file. So the Google Doc where you put in your arguments against and for while I go through those arguments with you in a couple of minutes. We'll take the same vote afterwards too to see if you changed your minds. But everybody should, if you could, go to the menti.com and put the code in and vote real fast on whether or not you think our energy policy should focus on protecting the environment or lowering energy costs. Okay, while you guys are voting here, I just want to say a couple of things. Welcome to fourth quarter. This long school year has 10 weeks left, so keep that in mind as you go through your assignments. I got 3 weeks of assignments already on Classroom for you guys, but I do want to tell you that fourth quarter will take, in about 2 weeks, we'll take a right degree turn. And what I mean by that is, as far as your weekly assignments go, having all of these terms and reading notes and websites to take a look at, that's going to change in about 2.5 weeks. We're going to go to the rest of fourth quarter. We're going to do 3 things. We're going to do some air prep because you guys have to take the air test this year. So the stuff that we didn't cover yet, that we still need to cover, we'll go over that with you. And then the rest of it are some project-based stuff, but basically two projects. The big ones are, you're going to make a personal political platform, and you're also going to do our financial literacy, where the big project there is try to make a family monthly budget with somebody in the classroom as your spouse. So, and you'll get jobs and everything for that. And you'll have an income to live off of, and you can house shop and car shop and stuff like that. So things will change, like I said, in about 2.5 weeks. As far as you guys prepping for the AP test, I know everybody said they want like take the AP test after school is out, that first week of June, or the second week of June, and they'll get back to you and let you know. But which one you're going to be in. But I think that's a good choice. But I also have a resource on the website for what the digital exam is going to look like. I think I told you about it last week, that it's 100 something. It was like 110 pages long. I was like, good Lord, that's an awful lot of information. So I got it down to, I think, like 20 or 25 pages. So take a look at that. That's just some useful information. And if you could spread the word to your classmates that are not here, make sure you test your system to make sure it works before June. I know that there were some issues last year when kids did online exams that, 5 minutes before the exam, they realized, oh my gosh, I didn't test this and it's not working and so forth. And so do all of that ahead of time. And that document I have up there explains how to go through all of that. As far as review goes, I'll give you guys as much review as you feel like you need, but you should have gotten, either you picked it up at the beginning of the school year or I handed it to you at the beginning of the school year, that AP test prep book. That's a really, really good prep book, because what it does is it condenses everything that we have learned this year. And, you know, I don't think you have to read the whole thing. I would just go through the content stuff and go over some of the sample questions in there too. So, but anything you don't understand, I can reteach it to you if you're in person, or we can connect. If you're a remote learner, we can connect via Zoom or Google Meet. Okay, so we have 11 participants. 7 of you took the time to vote on our poll here, and the topic is going to be the Keystone XL pipeline, but the real topic is what should our energy policy be? Okay, so I'm going to go through what is the Keystone pipeline, and then we'll go from there. Let me finish getting attendance real fast. If you haven't logged into menti.com and voted, go ahead and do that real fast. Okay, all right. Here we go. So somebody left a message there real fast. Okay. Alexis, I got your message that Angel's with you, and that's fine. All right, so let me do a screen share again. And let's look at what is the Keystone Pipeline. That's the topic today. And that this was, I don't know who did this. I have to look back at our suggestions, your suggestions, but one of your classmates suggested that we look at the Keystone Pipeline, which you may or may not have heard of, but it's a fight that's been going on for a good decade and a half. So let's take a look at what is the Keystone Pipeline. Okay, it is a pipeline that runs from Alaska all the way down into Kansas, Illinois, and down into Texas and Oklahoma. Okay, it's an oil pipeline, but it's controversial, not because it's being built in any different way, but just because the idea that maybe our government shouldn't be promoting the use of fossil fuels anymore. Okay, so it was commissioned in 2010. It's owned by a private company, TC Energy. That's a Canadian energy company. So I'll explain to you in a minute how they're getting oil out of the ground up here in Canada, and then they're shipping it to refineries in Illinois and Kansas, and ports down here in Texas, so it can be shipped to other parts of the world. Okay, so it's partially owned by this energy company and the government of Alberta, Canada. That's a state in Canada. Okay, so it runs from the Western Canadian sedimentary basin in Alberta to refineries and oil tank farms and so forth. Okay, so why is the U.S. government involved in this? Why is the federal government involved in this? And the answer is it's because it's interstate commerce, and you obviously can see it from the map. It's going from state to state to state, and when commerce goes across state lines, then that's something that the federal government has control over. Okay, now, why is this controversial? Okay, I'm going to have you look at a couple of the pictures in just a second, but number one is this oil production promotes the use of energy that creates greenhouse gases, CO2 emissions. I know you've been hearing this for years, all the way through schooling, not just in your science classes, but in other classes as well, that burning of these fossil fuels creates excess carbon dioxide, and that has increased the warming of the earth, leading to the the melting of the polar ice caps, the seas are starting to rise and the oceans are starting to rise and so forth. We've had stronger storms, more intense storms because of global warming and so forth. So you understand those issues. Also, there's an environmental impact. You can see the picture down here. This is strip mining is what it is. This is actually the mining of these tar sands, which this guy's holding right up here. So basically they scoop earth up and there's oil mixed in with this earth. And they kind of, I'm not a science person, so I'm not exactly sure how this works, but from what I understand from my research is they kind of squeeze the tar sands and get the oil out of it. Okay, so I think this kind of shows that we're getting a little desperate for where we're coming up with oil. Okay, I mentioned Native Americans here. You can see them protesting up in Washington, D.C. in this picture here. This goes through lots of Native American lands, especially up here in the Dakotas and Montana. Okay, some of these lands are sacred and have sacred value to the Native Americans. And also, these are lands that have been ceded to the Native Americans by our government through treaties by our federal government. So they want the United States government to stand up to their treaty agreements and say, don't put this pipeline across our land. Okay, and then there's eminent domain issues. That's something that we haven't covered yet. If we did, it was at the beginning of the school year. But eminent domain means this is going to sound very undemocratic. But in eminent domain, the government can come in and take somebody's private property for public use. Okay, and when they take the property, it's not just get off your land. They have to offer you a fair market value for your land. So if you're kicked out of your house because they're building a road, an extension of a road through your neighborhood, and it goes right through your house, and your house is worth $150,000, well, the government has to give you at least $150,000 for that land. The closest I've seen eminent domain work at our high school is when they expanded Kemper Road and Coleraine Avenue. Okay, well, not Coleraine Avenue, but that state route that continues north into up to Oxford. They changed the off and on ramps from Kemper Lane, and what they did was they had people's houses were in the way of these ramps. So they didn't just take the houses, they paid these folks money for their houses. So if you have land sitting on top of these tar sands, the government of Canada, if you have lands that this pipeline needs to go through, the federal government will just take your land and start to build this pipeline through there. All right, now what has happened recently with this? Okay, the first president that had to deal with this Keystone XL pipeline, which is this extension, this solid green line. Okay, that's the one that goes through Native American lands and so forth, and we got these eminent domain issues. But President Obama issued an executive order halting the construction of the Keystone XL pipeline. And one of the reasons he said was because that this is going to increase carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and it's going to make the global warming crisis worse. Okay, well, you know, when we looked at the executive branch, that when a president signs an executive order, the next president can come in and sign an executive order to undo that. And that's exactly what President Trump did. President Trump said, if this oil pipeline is built, it's jobs, it's American jobs, and it will continue the decrease of energy prices in the United States. We'll talk about that on the next slide. Okay, so he signed an executive order saying, go ahead and build the Keystone XL pipeline. And he did this, it was about 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago. So there has been construction on this. Well, last month, President Biden signed an executive order halting the construction of the Keystone XL pipeline, okay, for the same reasons that President Obama did. Okay, now, these are your debates, can be your debate topics. Let's look at the continuing building side, okay? This pipeline has the capability of moving 830,000 barrels of oil per day. That is a ton of oil, okay? And that oil then can be sent overseas. These companies can make money off of selling this oil. This pipeline is needed because our refineries are located near our coasts or in the middle of our country. It could create 28,000 construction jobs, not to mention the jobs of maintaining the pipeline afterwards. And also the increase in oil production could lead to more jobs at these refineries and in these ports. Decreases the dependency on Middle Eastern oil. We've been talking about this since the 1970s. If we could just stop our reliance on Middle Eastern oil. So the world's largest oil reserves are still in Saudi Arabia. Okay, for political reasons in the 70s and 80s and so forth. These nations, they were an organization called OPEC, which is the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. All these countries got together and they formed a conglomeration, and they controlled basically the worldwide price of oil. And we were a hostage to them because there was nothing we could do, because they sold oil to us at double the price of the barrel, whatever, let's say it went from $14 to $28. That meant gasoline went from $1 to $2 a gallon. So since that time, we've done whatever we can to decrease our dependence on Middle Eastern oil. And I do have to give a shout out to this one. I just want to give you my experience. I remember taking a driving vacation in, I believe it was 2007. And I remember stopping in West Virginia. We were heading to Outer Banks in North Carolina. Stopping, it must have been West Virginia, Kentucky, I can't remember. But I remember looking at the price of gas. It was $4.99 a gallon. That's the highest I've ever seen gas prices. Around that time, it cost me in the winter I have natural gas that heats my home. It cost me over $300 to heat my home a month. Those prices basically have been cut in half. We're paying on average about $2.50. It's a little higher than that per gallon of gasoline. And one of the reasons is because we've increased our production of oil in the United States. And another thing, people who are in favor of building this pipeline, I don't think they're necessarily against renewable energy, things like solar power, wind power, and so forth. It's just that those types of renewable energy sources right now are expensive. I don't know if you ever looked into the price of an electric car. I'd love to have an electric car. They average about $50,000 to $70,000 a car. Depending on the kind that you build. The cheapest ones are still over $40,000. You can get a new car for half that price, a gas-powered car. So it is expensive to run this type of energy. And you can't just turn the fossil fuel switch off and turn on the renewable energy switch. It would drive up the prices of oil, of energy. Okay. Now, as far as stopping the construction, here's what the folks say. They say this will harm the environment in the long term because it increases carbon emissions. I don't think, it's hard to predict the future, but I don't think they're wrong here, right? The more oil we produce, the more we use, okay? And not only will it increase CO2 emissions, but there's actually ecosystems in Nebraska and the plains area that this is unstable land. The land sometimes is really soft and it might be susceptible to collapse. This pipeline is being built above ground in most spots. Okay, so it's on these pipeline on top of these, a giant pipe on top of these, basically on top of a ramp. There's these just these concrete, I don't know what to call them, pillars holding them up. The unstable land, if the land shifts, that means the pipeline could burst. And then all of a sudden there's, those 830,000 barrels of oil per day could be spilling onto these fragile ecosystems. And if you think that might be a stretch, I don't know if you remember the BP Exxon or the BP oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. There's still, that happened 12 years ago, and they're still finding oil in the Gulf of Mexico. So 12 years later, it's still impacting the ecosystem. Okay. Another thing environmentalists say is there's a greater danger of leaking in this pipeline because of these tar sands. This tar sand oil is thicker, so it runs slower. So if you've got a crack in the pipe, because the oil runs slower, there's a greater chance of a spill. And in 2019, part of the pipeline that had been built was shut down for a number of weeks because of a spill. Okay. And if it's above ground and there's a spill, that spill goes into, onto the surface of the earth there. And then Native Americans, as we talked about before, this is damage to their sacred sites. They don't want this pollution. They don't want water contamination. If there's a spill, it can get into the water and it would harm their water supply. And I think they got a pretty strong argument here that the United States government signed these treaties with us. They gave us control of this land on these reservations, and now they want to run these pipelines through these reservations, go around us, build the pipeline around us instead of going through our land. Okay. Anybody have any questions about the information there? No? Okay. So I am going to put you into rooms in just a second. Let me figure out how many I need. Let's see. Okay, there's 14 of you. So let's go with 4 rooms. Some will have 4 and some will have 3. And remember, you want to argue in favor or against and try to persuade your classmates there. All right, you should be getting a message to go into your breakout room. Go ahead and do that. Okay, we got a few more people still in their rooms, and they'll be out in just a second.
Yeah, me too.
Oh, I could tell. Her, Tammy, Angel.
I'll be back.
Okay, so let's have a class discussion as we end here. Hand the floor over to you guys. What do you think? To me, this is a tough issue because I don't think anybody's in favor of tearing up the earth and destroying the earth. On the other hand, we sure do like cheap energy prices. So I don't know if there's a middle ground on this one or not. So, but anyway, I'll hand it over to you guys. Just go ahead and unmute yourself and tell us what you think.
I was gonna say, I feel like we are going to have to move to renewable energy at some point. So it would be better to do that now and not destroy Native American land and the earth further, like when we already will have to do it in the first place. Like we'll already have to change what we're doing in the first place eventually.
So your thinking is along the lines of when is it going to be? It might as well be now. Let's start making
Right.
this change. And I think we are slowly making the change to renewable energy.
I know like more people are using like solar panels on their houses and more windmills and stuff like that. And I think like that's things that we should be doing instead of destroying the earth. I feel like we're more advanced as like humans than that at this point.
Certainly. If we can put a man on the moon, which we did 50 years ago, we could figure, or 60 years ago almost, we can figure out how to harness the wind and create energy from that.
Right. And not destroy the planet we're living on. We
Right.
need to live on.
Right. It's the only one we got. Okay. Very good, Olivia. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Who else wants to chime in and say something about the environment or fossil fuels, or maybe we could have both at the same time?
The only problem I have with like changing into renewable energies, I guess, because I look at it as like an addiction to oil, and if we just convert to renewable energies, you're just like taking out the oil. It's going to be hard to transition to that, even if it's like forced. But if we do it kind of like a rehab kind of way, I think it'll be a more cleaner transition.
Francis, it's funny. I was thinking the exact same word. We need to go through energy rehab. Is what we need.
I think because like with the without the dependency of Middle Eastern oil, I think it'll be like much cheaper, and then we're able to use that expense to put into like other environmental issues or issues like that.
And it doesn't it make that worse? I mean, if we're making cheaper energy, or if we're making fossil fuel energy sources cheaper to use, it makes the problem worse of destroying the atmosphere, destroying the environment. It's going to increase CO2 emissions. Okay, Jamie, you look like you were going to say something before. Were you going to say something?
I'm debating each side, and I'm torn because I see Francis's point, but at the same time, I don't want our ecosystems and planet to be hurt any worse than they already are. But he did make a point that it's not going to be that affordable for everybody to switch over to renewable energy anytime soon. For everybody, people are making the switch, which I think is amazing. But it's like he said, it'll be difficult to switch to renewable energy so soon.
Yeah, the switch is really slow. I mean, I thought it would be faster, but it's gone pretty slow. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and put the Mentimeter back up. You guys can vote again. And let me see, share screen. There you go. See if you change your mind. See if anybody moved from protecting the environment over to lowering energy costs. Once you've done that, you can leave and you can head on to your next Zoom class. Thank you everybody for participating today and always participating on our Wednesday sessions. This is the highlight of my week, talking to you guys and hearing you guys express your viewpoints on these topics. Makes me feel like I'm a teacher again. I don't know, somebody switched over to lowering energy costs.